Wednesday, March 25th, 1970. I was on my trip to Javier. I officiated the service in Javier. I've heard stories about my grandfather, and I've known about the old pictures of him, of Ka Felix and Ka Erdi, since my youth. But it wasn't until recently that I found out about his journal. To hold his journal with my own hands, to flip through it and read his handwritten entries, it's just all so surreal to me.
There are stories that people tell, and then there are stories that are never told, but live on in people's hearts that shape their paths and their lives. Join us in this 12-part Centennial series and see what story will live on in you. "24-year-old Justin Lugtu from Concord, California, never met his grandfather, Brother Salvador Lugtu, in person. Brother Salvador started as a volunteer worker in 1953 and later became a district minister in 1964. He died 2 years before Justin, his first grandchild, was born. Today, as Justin is about to enter the College of Evangelical Ministry, knowing all the details of the life of his grandfather means more to him now than ever. He sat down with his dad and his uncle, who are both head deacons, to learn more about his grandfather.
He was a patient teacher too, especially tried to ask him about biblical doctrines. He would really spend long hours with you. But I was debating him, right? And it took us up to, if I'm not mistaken, up to 4 o'clock in the early morning, from assuming from 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock. That's how patient he was, you know. He loves teaching, you know, and he's a debater, you know.
Ngayon upang saksiyan ang debating magaganap sa pagitan po ng dalawang relihiyon, ang Iglesia ni Cristo at
Brother Salvador was one of the debaters of the Iglesia ni Cristo in the 1960s, at a time when defending the church was necessary but challenging.
Back then, because there were only a few members, right, in the Philippines, we suffered persecutions in such a way that you would have to defend the doctrines that you believe. So we had no choice but to consult our dad and ask him and make him teach us on how to debate, right?
Brother Salvador stood 5'11" and was soft-spoken and was almost unassuming as a debater. But when he did speak, he did not rely on his own capabilities and prepared meticulously.
I can remember him studying the whole week, from morning till afternoon, unless he has a Bible study. All he did was put together lessons, and of course, with the help of God, the one he debated against lost, and obviously lost, and he was actually confused what answer to say, because your grandpa has a style of asking how many questions? Three questions.
Three questions. You check me. You're gone.
Either way you go, you lose.
Socratic style. Yeah.
Public debates were the form of entertainment in the Philippines during the early days. For the pioneering members, it was validation that they were God's children. And after every debate, the truth in God's word always prevailed, fueling their desire to keep fighting the good fight of faith.
Nung araw, pagka may diskusyon, maraming dumadalong tao.
There were so many of us, truckloads.
Marami din kapatid na nandun.
Basta nalamang meron ganung debate na mangyayari, several talaga puno na yun ng mga kapatid.
Members of the church came by the truckloads, which became opportunities for many to learn about the Iglesia ni Cristo, and for pioneering ministers like Brother Cornelio Robregado. They were all taught how to defend their faith from Brother Felix Manalo, who Iglesia ni Cristo members believe to be God's last messenger in these last days.
Katulad ng patutunayan nila si Cristo Diyos. Afirmatibo sila. Ako ang negatibo. Maraming nakakaunawa sa pahayag ng Iglesia ni Cristo. Dahil sa yung mga tao, interesado na makaunawa talaga.
Talagang sabi ko, talagang totoo ito. Ganyan. Kasi lahat naman talaga naman binabasa naman sa kwan eh. Hindi gaya ng mga ibang reliyon na yung kanilang kwan lang, kanilang palagay lang sa ang inaano. Tayo sa Biblia talaga nanggagaling.
But debates weren't the only opportunities for members to fight for their faith. In fact, defending who they were became a part of everyday life.
Kaya noon, kahit na simpleng kapatid, may tungkulin, talagang nakikipaglaban. Tama naman dahil sa kung hindi nangyari yun, baka hindi sumulong yung Iglesia.
Speaking from Manila, and this time I've got a real scoop for you. Manila has just been bombed. In fact, right now it is being bombed. And without warning...
On December 8, 1941, the Philippines was attacked just hours after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. But unlike in Hawaii, the Imperial Japanese forces intended to invade the Philippines, and their calculated attacks would lead to the capture of Manila by January 1942. Heavy fighting would then move into the Bataan Peninsula.
Bataan was a battlefield, and we were just able to leave the place on time, running in the middle of the night, running out and hiding under the. We had dugouts. Practically, we were living in the dugouts. We were bombarded with cannons, U.S. cannons, Japanese cannons. The bombarding would be in the middle of the night, midnight, sometimes very early in the morning.
Oh, that's the worst time. Oh my goodness. Dun sa silong na bahay mo, you can hear them running. Diyos ko, baka panikin tong bahay natin. You go like this, they're here. Ang daming napatay.
Subject, surrender.
The Bataan Peninsula was among the worst-hit areas in 1941. After almost 4 months of fighting, the U.S. and Filipino army in Bataan would fall captive to the Japanese, and by May 1942, the Philippines was occupied.
Which have overwhelmed Corregidor.
When the hostilities were sort of a little bit cleared, we came back home. But everything that we had were burned.
With 7 children, Ana Carita's mother led her family to a nearby barrio, finding a small home for them to purchase.
So we lived there, and it was a very old house, and there were holes in the roof. And fortunately, the immediate neighbor, was a relative, and they were members of the Church of Christ. So they were missionizing my mother, and according to my mother, when she first heard the verses of the Bible, she said to herself, this is what I am looking for, because she felt peace in her heart. My sister was very angry with my mother because we were Catholics. So my sister went, and then she was telling me that the first time she heard the lesson, she said her tears were just falling down her cheeks, and she was doing like this because she did not want the others to see her crying, because she was the one who was very adamant about not going, and here she was crying.
One by one, Ana Corita and her family would join the Iglesia ni Cristo. They would join the many others across the country who would find their faith during one of the darkest moments in Philippine history.
During the Japanese War, oh my God. I'm young at that time, it's 1940. I'm only 5 or 6 years old.
We are walking there, the guerrillas. My father was shot by one shot, my 3 brothers from the guerrillas.
You did not buy rice because there was nothing to buy.
Every time I think of those days, I said, will I be saved? I feel like devastated too. But then I remember always what mananalangin ka. That's your weapon. Brother Felix Manalo, that is always his advice.
As the war went on, the Japanese became less and less accommodating. With a growing resistance movement from the Filipinos and Americans, they became paranoid of any movement to defy them. Their suspicions would result in an increase of violence towards the Filipinos, including the members of the Iglesia ni Cristo.
Naano pa siya ng hapon, bayoneta. Doon po tumama sa bakal niya. Nasintron kaya yung bakal niya, dala-dala niya. Dala-dala niya pero marami po ng mga talagang pagliligtas ng Ama.
The true worship in the Iglesia ni Cristo continued. Led by Brother Felix Manalo and the ministers and workers who assisted him, they continued to care for each member, even at the risk of their own lives.
The ministers, there's so many they gave their lives to in officiating the worship service. I remember so many ministers that was killed by the Japanese, killed by the guerrillas while performing their duties.
Kami pa po ang nagbalita. Siya pa po ang nagbalita doon sa asawa na nasa Bulacan. Mapatay yung ministro. Na binaon sila yata ng buhay. Parang gano'n.
The dangers to their lives did not stop the members from worshiping, but made them yearn even more for the words of God.
Mga naka-squat lamang sila, ang gagawin, ang lalagyan ko ng damit, maliit ang kahoy na ginawa ng tatay ko. Papatong namin yun sa 4 na kabang palay, tatakpan namin ang kumot na puti, tuloy ang pagsamba.
It's hard to have a worship service then. We hold like we go in a group under the tree. Whenever possible, we could have a prayer and have small verses of the Bible. We do it.
Was from town to town, they passed by in the field to give us the lesson.
Dahil sa pananampalataya, sinasabi ng Biblia, kahit na 3 o 2 na sasamba at magtitipon para manalangin sa Diyos, ganun ang ginagawa namin.
We worship God, in a small nipahat there in the field, and we cannot stand because it's too low. Wala kang maupan, nakasalampak kami. But then it's very spiritual because we ask God help.
Despite the threats and dangers members faced, they not only continued to serve God, but they shared their faith at all costs.
Mga panahon yun, nagme-mission kami. Malakas ang gawain.
And my mother is a missionera, so that's why I was also her assistant deaconess during that time. So I have to, ikaw manalangin anak, sabi niya, tara magdalaw tayo, mag-mission tayo.
Hindi sila natatakot. Handa silang magtiis.
The Philippines would be liberated from Japanese rule in 1945, and with prayer as their weapon and their faith to guide them, the brethren witnessed firsthand just what God could do for His people.
You know, it's so hard during those days, during the war. It's hard, but then, you know, God has the promises, fulfill His promise that He will never abandon us. That we feel so much during those days na doon mo madadama na ang Diyos ay tinupad ang pangako. Huwag kang matakot, alalayan kita. Oh, we feel that. We feel that.
For Brother Salvador Lugto, whose experiences in the ministry were nearly 20 years after World War II began, the persecutions in the church still continued, but with different groups of people.
Did you experience that, according to your memory, any persecutions?
There's one instance that I can vividly remember when your grandpa attended the ministerial class.
Oh.
And what I can remember during that class is that right after the class, your income or your grandpa, his facial expression changed. I would say in the middle of being sad and a regular facial expression.
Okay.
And a little bit of a concern also. And then when we got home, he said, we are being assigned to Mexico, Pampanga.
In 1969, the New People's Army, NPA, the military wing of the Communist Party in the Philippines, was founded by individuals from Mexico, Pampanga, a city with a long history of social unrest and violence.
There was one instance when your grandpa woke up in the middle of the night, and I happened to wake up as well, and he was just by the window looking outside, and then I became curious because he was in the middle of the night. So I got up and looked outside, and there's this a vehicle filled with these rebels, and I can see their weapons there, some pistols, some automatic weapons. They were just showing them. The impression I got is they were trying to scare us. And then your grandpa finally said in Tagalog, anong ginagawa niyo dyan? Magsiuwi na kayo, gabi na. In English, it's already late. In a nice tone, he said, it's already late in the evening, you should go home. And then they just laughed. And then I've never seen that happen anymore. However, there were instances when, because of your grandpa's concern with the brethren, he will make sure that when they leave, for example, the meeting, like the head deacons, on the way out, he will follow them up to a certain number of blocks, and then from what I remember, even your grandma would follow behind your grandpa, not knowing grandma was doing that. And when your grandpa is certain that they are okay, they're not being followed, then he will come back. So that was probably one of the most difficult assignments when it comes to that situation, persecution that we have been. We survived. we survived because of God's help.
Hardship, I believe, right, and your dad could also attest to that. Hardship is also a blessing because somehow it strengthens the strand of every strand of your faith, your character.
Before, actually, being a member of the Iglesia is something different because everybody is trying to mock on you. Everybody is trying to tease you, telling that you're an Iglesia ni Kulapu, Iglesia ni Manalo. So that's why sometimes we are being ashamed of being a member of the Iglesia. So that's why what the admonition of Brother Felix is, kung tumupad ka ayon sa pananampalataya mo. Hindi dahil sa natatakot ka, hindi dahil sa nahihiya ka, hindi dahil sa meron kang gustong pakisamahan.
Anywhere you go, anyway, if you're Iglesia, you almost encounter persecution. During those days, it's very strong. Persecution always abound in any other way.
Binabato pa nga yung mga yun. They throw stone. Kahit sa mga kapilya, binabato ang Iglesia.
Persecutions would take many forms through the years, pushing members to decide, do they fight or do they hide? For many, the choice was simple.
Because Iglesia is not well known yet at that time. At school, I fight with kids just to defend myself that Iglesia is right. You're Catholic are wrong. So they said, oh, how could it be right if you're only a few? I said, one of these days we will be plenty.
Since the time that Brother Felix Manalo began to preach in 1914, many have targeted the church because of its beliefs. They would be thrown rocks, persecuted, laughed at, and belittled. Many would be threatened and some even killed simply because they believed in biblical truths. Even after the war, they continued to fight a different battle, one that proved to be the most important fight of their lives.
Bago magtapos yung taon 1948, naipasya ng kapatid na Felix Manalo na si kapatid na Prudencio Vasquez na nangasir sa Rizal, State of Rizal, dadalhin sa Naga City. Doon kami tumuloy. At gabi noon, nag-anyaya na yung pamilya ng Karuna, nag-anyaya na sa bahay niya ng mga makikinig. Nang malaman ng sanlibutan, umalis ang pag-uusig nun. Pagka umaga na, yung bahay ng kapatid na Karunan, yung palang paggabi, binabato ng tae. Matindi ang pag-uusig nun. Minumura ang kapatid na Felix Manalo. At kung ano-anong mga masasamang salita ang sinasabi nila tungkol sa kay kapatid na Felix Manalo at sa Iglesia ni Cristo. Dahil nga mga sarado katoliko sila. Hanggat sa pinagbabantaan kaming patayin. Hindi naman kami natatakot nun. Dahil ang pinanghawakan namin nun, yung sinabi ng kapatid na Felix Manalo, hindi kayo mamamatay hanggat may pagagawa sa inyo ang Diyos.
The hardest of persecutions came from those closest to them. their friends, and their families.
Well, we were really in the thick of the persecution, really. Our relatives and I think all of the people in the barrio were persecuting us. We were not bothered by any persecution. We just went ahead and we went to worship services and we did our tungkulin.
Pagkat katuparan yun ng sinasabi ng Biblia, uusigin ng Iglesia. Kaya hindi kami nagtataka nun. Nakahanda ng aming buhay, ano man mangyari. Pagkat yun ang pinagtaasan ng aming kanang kamay sa mabuhay, sa mamatay.
You know, there's one time, Brother Ranyo told us that the generation now is really changing. There will be a time that when we older people, the fathers and the mothers, the old members are gone, actually, he is really worried about the future of the younger one.
It is an ever-changing battle, a fight that each person must face. These pioneers have spent many years fighting this good fight, and now generously passing on lessons they've learned through the years.
I remember what Brother Felix Manalo tell me na mananalangin kang parati. Sabi niya, ang Diyos ay malapit sa mga taong kumikilala nang magkaroon ka ng kababaan loob. Ask God to na ibiyaya sa iyo yung kababaang loob.
In your thought, in your speech, and in your works, always ask for the guidance. Don't forget that. Your thoughts, your speech, and your works. Because when you everything good, believe that God will truly be pleased and glorified.
Talagang maraming pagsubok. Maraming pangyayari nga talagang, alam mo na si Satanas kung ano-anong inaano niya para noon mapahamak ka. Pero ganun pa man labanan mo yun. Lagi kang medyos tayo, mas malakas kay Satanas yun. Lagi mananalangin sa Diyos.
Kahit si kapatid na Manalo lang sinabi, pagka kayo nanalangin, magpasalamat kayo. May karapatan kayong nanalangin. Hindi lahat binibigyan ng karapatang manalangin. Always pray. Pray. And be grateful for what God has given you. Ibinigay sa'yo na may pagkain ka, be grateful. Wag kayong what's that, yung walang utang na loob. Laging mapagpasalamat.
These pioneering members have seen many things through the years, and their hearts have been tested to no end. But with every experience and every lesson, they are proof that every triumph can only be for one reason.
Hindi po ito gawa ng tao, imposible po. Talagang ang Iglesia po tunay at ang Ama ang maalalay talaga sa Iglesia. Dahil kitang-kita ko po kung paano napaka-imposible tapos posibleng nangyayari. Sana umabot pa ako ng ika-100 taong anibersaryo na Iglesia. Yun po. Sana po umabot pa ako.
Sometimes I'm thinking, For 100 years, the people of God have been journeying, and I am one of them.
January 25th, 1970. From 2 a.m., I took the first trip bus from
It's still early in Justin's journey, a journey that will take him to fight his own good fight.
I officiated the service in St. Bernard.
Carrying with him the lessons he has learned from those around him, he looks forward with courage and faith, ready to face the road made possible by the countless pioneers, including his own grandfather, who have fought the good fight, so Justin would have a chance to fight his.
I think the lesson here is that whatever your income, right, your granddad started, that has to be kept alive, right? His legacy, right, that has to remain. It cannot stop with us. It has to go on, you know. So, and it shouldn't just go on. It has to be stronger, you know. So you and your cousins, make sure that you pass on the legacy that we get from our dad, you know.
And even though it was difficult, he enjoyed what he was doing, because, and this is something he shared with us, he was really looking forward to what is to come. He taught us that even though we have the freedom to enjoy this world, what he has inculcated in our mind is that we were born to serve.
Yeah.
They said they think that's my dad right there, my baby.
Yeah, siguro. This your grandpa, yeah. Sa lady rin yan.
Look here, he looks like my dad. Like these two pictures, look. It's like his clone. This is my grandmother, Anna Lugtu, or as the family and I know her, my Apu Aning. When I see her, I'm reminded that her eyes have seen the church in its humble years, that in her arms she raised 7 children and 19 grandchildren, and that with a humble heart, she loved and continues to love us all. The stories about Inkong Ading, whether that's from our family or from other brethren, like how does it make you feel when you hear the stories?
Siyempre, na-inspire pa rin ako, at saka masaya. Kasi nakikita ko yung mga anak ko, yung mga apo ko na masigla sa kanilang mga tungkulin. Kahit mahirap lang kami, yun ang malaking kayamanang binigay sa akin ng Panginoon. Ang nakita ko yung mga anak ko, mga apo ko na masiglang tumutupad sa kanilang mga tungkulin. Yun ang malaking biyaya sa akin. Sorry.
It's okay. Even though I didn't get to meet him,
Yeah.
I feel his love through you. And you've taught me the things he shared with you, how to love, Christian values, and I'm blessed to still have you.
You know,
pray for me na maba pa yung buhay ko. I wanna see you preaching for you. Okay?
I pray for you, Apo. God willing, okay?